Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Whitetail Apprentice Series. I'm your host, Josh Sluck, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Christopher Leppert. Chris, how you doing?
What's up, brother?
Doing okay. So on this episode, we are missing a Mr. Jacob Sklinner. He has some sort of odd relationship with poison sumac, and he gets poison sumac like no other, and he's got it all over his face. So he is not joining us.
Do you think it could just be STDs and he won't admit it? There we go. There's the icebreaker we need. Let's talk,
There we
guys.
go. Yeah, so Sklinner's not going to be on. Chris and I will be hosting the podcast. We are joined by two guests this evening. Our guest, Mr. Jake Booth. Jake, how you doing?
Good. How you guys doing?
Doing all right. And then another guest, Mr. Jacob Emery.
I just happen to be here.
Speak up a little bit.
I just happen to be here.
Emery happened to come up and be hunting, so we were like, "Hey, hop on this podcast with us. This is right up your alley."
Right on.
So on this episode, we are going to talk about all things RUT, different RUT tactics, kind of our thoughts and our processes when we're targeting bucks during the RUT. Yes, I said targeting bucks during the RUT. Most people think that the RUT is chaos, and for a lot of deer it is. I mean, if you look at the research, there's a lot of chaos with the RUT, and things do get complex and really hard to pin down. But we are going to talk a little bit on this episode about how you can potentially target bucks, specific bucks, that is, during the RUT. And Jake is going to help us with that. Jake, are you of the assumption that you can target a specific buck?
Yes, sir. Yep,
All
I've
right.
done it a couple times.
Perfect. We're going to get into that, and real heavy on this podcast. But we're going to kind of work through the RUT time frame here, and we got a good mix here. Chris, myself, kind of the Midwest. So is Emery. Emery hunts all over. Jake, you hunt Kentucky, but also down south.
Yep.
So we have a good variety here of different parts of the U.S. And to help clarify things, because we know the RUT time frames are different in the regions, the terminology we're going to use is more like pre-RUT, RUT, or we may talk about seeking or chasing or lockdown, because those are kind of applicable across the board. But this is coming out at the end of October, so we are going to start with a pre-RUT time frame. So to really kick this off, Jake, during the pre-RUT time frame, kind of go into a little bit of your well first, in case the listeners don't know, because I've only heard you on maybe one or two podcasts. So give a brief background of who you are and some of your expertise, maybe some of the bucks you've taken in the RUT, so that way the listeners get an idea of what they're listening to. And then let's go into how you kind of look at the pre-RUT and your tactics around that.
Yeah. So most of my serious hunting is done in North Alabama. I live in Northwest Georgia now, and I do some hunting here in Georgia. But I started venturing out to Kentucky a little bit. I've hunted there for the last 3 years. And I like to be an early season guy. I've never really got it done early season. The only time I have is in Kentucky. I didn't kill early season, but I had my chances and opportunities, and I just couldn't close the deal. That's pretty much it. I'm a road hunter. That's when I get it done. That's the most fun time for me to hunt, and that's when I take off all my time off from work. So big on the RUT.
How many bucks would you say you've taken in that time frame?
Probably all of my bucks have come from the RUT. However many I have, that's how many were taken during the RUT.
All right. And you've taken some really nice bucks.
I mean, for Alabama, Georgia, and I got a pretty good one last year in Kentucky. But it's a Kentucky buck. It was like 143 and 7/8 or something. Which, some guys up in Kentucky wouldn't even shoot that one. But when I saw him, it was a no doubter.
I'd be no doubting we'd be Gwen Stefani and that little sucker all day long.
Shoot his grandson.
Yeah. But my biggest bucks have came from Alabama. So Alabama holds it holds dear in my heart. It's my favorite place to hunt and my favorite deer to hunt. So
What kind of size we talking down there?
my biggest Bama buck is like a couple eighths inches bigger than my Kentucky buck, but it's still my biggest. It's 144-inch 8-pointer
That's a big 8-point.
with only 15-inch spread.
Wow.
Oh my God.
It's that one right here. I don't know if you see him.
I see it. Wow.
He's a toad. What was do you remember the mass measurements on that thing?
I don't. I've got them wrote down somewhere, because I score bucks for Buckmasters and stuff. So I score everything I shoot and my buddies shoot. But yeah, I killed him January 5th. So that's why, before we started talking, not January 5th, January 15th. The rut time frames are drastically different from Midwest to South. So
I'm going to the hill country from now on.
you got to. I know where you were when you were down here. It's not the same. You got to get in the hills, the mountains.
I was all over. I couldn't pay him to go to the spot I was in when I left.
Oh man,
I was going to hunt deer down or die, and I died. I was so pissed when I'm like, well, it's the rut. Surely I'll have some little moron wander by me. No.
That's one thing I listened to earlier on one of y'all's podcasts was how the rut's not as aggressive down south as it is like in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason that is, whether it's because the rut is so spread out over a time frame over the state or the number of does, whatever it may be.
I think it's all of that, and
Yeah.
I also think it's you can't see it because you don't have it's thicker wood. Where I'm talking, not where Chris was, but where I'm talking, you're not going to see it even if it's happened 80 yards of you. You might even hear it and won't lay eyes on it, but you hear grunting, running, all kinds of stuff.
Wow. Yep. Well, it's kind of funny because you're in the hills and you're on great deer, and then you jump over to Georgia and Stewart's over there. Freaking, it was like every 2 weeks Stewart had another huge mountain buck, and I'm like, oh my God, you're in Georgia, dude. Stop.
Yeah, I made sure to sit down and listen to his seminar in Georgia at the expo.
Yep. He's going to be one of the Glenn Sullivan's, one of the other one the Southern Outdoorsman boys just had on. Bobby. He's going to be that guy in 40 years.
I tell you what, I think Bobby Worthington might be my favorite hunter. Like of all the bigger name guys, I think he might be it.
I'm with you. I listen to the podcast and I started listening to him, and we do a lot of the same things. And I forgot I read his book years ago, his bow hunting trophy whitetails, and I started remembering all the things I picked up in that book, and I still run with it today.
Dude, the thing I think I'm most excited about too is the majority of Southern people tell me that Tennessee isn't the real South, so we get to claim him as Midwesterners. Well, it's like the racial draft on the Chappelle Show. Like we get Bobby Worthington.
Yeah, he's killed some big deer in Tennessee, but you also got to remember he killed some big ones in Illinois too.
Mm-hmm.
He's a true woodsman, man, and really really respectable guy.
Yep.
Yeah. Some of the points that we'll bring up later are very similar to some of Bobby's tactics. And like Jake's, you said you picked up some of it from him. He's these kind of rut based tactics, like funnels in particular. That's his jam. He's kind of a whitetail legend when it comes to that. And for anyone that's interested, the Southern Outdoorsman released a podcast. Would have been a few weeks ago now. It's a really good episode with Bobby Worthington. There's 2 parts to it. The second part is rut funnels and tactics based around that. It's another good one. So I do recommend people going to listen to that and kind of combine it with what you hear on here on this podcast. And I think you'll have a really good overview of how you can tackle the rut. But with that, so pre-rut time frame, Jake, what are you looking for, or just kind of go into your pre-rut tactics? Like, what are you looking for? Are you hunting doe bedding at that time? Or are you still hunting more buck bedding? What exactly are you doing in that time frame?
So yeah, we'll talk. I think you said the time frame was around the 25th ish, like Midwest stuff. So if I'm around that time frame, I'm in Kentucky, and just because I'm a rut hunter, even if I'm hunting September, early October, like I am now, I'm still just looking for areas to be successful during the rut. I'm not really trying to kill them right now. I am if I come across some fresh sign and everything. But I've hunted the feed trees stuff. I've hunted, I've done all the stuff I've heard these people talk about, and I'm not an early season guy. I've been close a few times, like I said, but what I'm doing pre-rut is just looking for places to hunt during the rut, and I'm keeping tabs on those. If I keep going into an area and I keep jumping does or seeing does or having does bed beside me, I'm remembering that, and that's what got my Kentucky buck killed this year. And it's usually always close to some, it's big woods where I'm hunting, but I'm finding the thicker edge, the thicker habitat transition. It may be all oaks, but it's real old oaks butted up against some younger oaks. It's not like a hard oak to pine. It could be it's anything that's thicker, because where I hunt Kentucky, it's kind of hard to find thickets. So that's what I'm doing is keeping tabs on the does and hunting closer to thicker areas.
Are you killing your deer with a bow, a gun, or a mix of both?
Mix of both, but
Okay.
I'll tell you right now, I'm not out there to be the best archer. As soon as archery season goes out,
Man,
I've got my rifle and I don't feel bad about it, because especially where I hunt in Alabama, it's you're just not where I hunt. You're not going to get those deer standing broadside for a minute feeding on something. I don't even remember the last time I've killed a deer eating. I mean, it's always they're going point A to point B, and that's where I'm hunting. So yes, I kill. I mean, I'm 99% rifle. I mean, no no qualms about that.
okay.
But I will say, even though I'm killing them with a rifle, I'm killing them in bow range with a rifle. I'd have to think. I'd have to think back many years the last time I killed a deer over 60 yards with a rifle.
Wow. I just bought my first rifle, and
I saw it.
I'd kill every single deer for the rest of my life with a gun and never feel bad about it.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say they're pretty close based on the areas you were talking about. You're looking for that habitat diversity and
Yep.
those thickets and stuff. You're getting up close and personal.
Yep. You have to.
Yeah, and I feel like, I don't know. I'm primarily a bow hunter, but I feel like even if I was gun hunting, I would still look for those areas. And I feel like the people I hear that are real successful gun hunting are still looking for those areas where they can kill them with a bow.
Yep.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense to me. So, question on those doe groups that you're keeping tabs of. So, are you like just keeping a mental log of these? Are you jotting them down of like how many are in this group, like maybe age class of the does? Are you marking any, like if they're here, like are you jotting down like, okay, if a buck was to come through here, they'd probably come on this one if they're going to catch the downwind side? How does that look to you?
Yes to all of that, and I'll you ask my wife, I forget anything she tells me within 5 seconds, but I don't forget what I see in the woods when it comes to deer. I remember a lot of stuff, but I do have a journal. I write every hour that I hunt. What I saw, what the wind was doing, what the temperature was, all that stuff. But for as I don't really write down. I'll write down if I see those, but I don't really say where they're at, because in my first sentence of my journal, I say where I was hunting, kind of. So I kind of keep tabs on them that way. But what I do when I find those is I hang cameras, and I'm not getting the buck I want to hunt right away, because late September, early October, they're not really checking those does yet. But as soon as, man, I'm gonna say around the 15th, 18th, I'll start getting them. And once I start getting them, even if it's a night, I'm pretty excited, because I know that's if I'm getting you more than once, and it's just not a, hey, I'm a big woods deer roaming through one time at 2 a.m. I'm never gonna, I'm not really gonna pay attention to that. But if I see a buck keeps coming through, I get pretty excited, and that's that's what I do in Alabama, and I took that to Kentucky, and ended up getting the deer I found in mid-October, and I got him on November 17th.
Makes a lot of sense. So you're kind of staging these areas with cameras in anticipation that you're going to catch some bucks coming through. And so your pre-rut time frame is spending time collecting areas, identifying these doe groups, and then to capitalize on those later on.
Yes, and they're usually in some sort of saddle or some kind of terrain feature, something to make them be coming through there. But it's always, I'm still looking for, it's not just any saddle. They're not all created equal. They have to be wanting to come through it. There's a million saddles out there where I'm hunting. You could sit, a bunch of them and not see anything. So I'm looking for something to make them use the saddle, and then keeping track of the does, hang the cameras, and then let the cameras kind of tell me what's going on.
Okay.
Cameras are a big deal.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So, and you kind of answered my next question. I was going to ask how you're hanging these cameras. So you're finding some sort of terrain feature or habitat feature to kind of narrow down their travel and hanging a camera on that to ensure that you're getting them coming through.
Yep. And again, where I'm hunting, it's hard to find a deer trail. Like I figured that out the first year I started hunting there, and I come across some areas where there's actual deer trails, and I start following them and looking and scouting, and I kind of find why they're funneling through an area, and that's where I'll hang a camera. And that's where I've had all my close encounters with big bucks, and that's where I've killed them too in Kentucky. So it everywhere is different. You can find trails anywhere in Georgia and Alabama and hang cameras on them and not get anything worth hunting. But out here where I'm at, if you find that, it's pretty good. It's a golden triangle there.
All right. Emery, I'm going to switch over to you. Is your pre-rut time frame tactics, are they the same? Do they differ? Are you targeting bucks during that time frame?
Yeah, so for me, that it seems like by that 20th to 25th of October time frame, I've got every deer that's going to call that area home for the next month and a half or so. And that's when I kind of start doing the same thing Jake does. By then, if maybe it's a new place, maybe it's an old familiar place, try to locate that primary food source where, the conglomeration of the deer are going to mainly at night, paired with doe bedding, paired with somewhere in the middle, finding something that they've got to either cross or come through. Those are where I'll have formers set up, mainly just kind of waiting on them when they start moving during daylight.
Okay. So are you, once you catch them on camera moving in daylight, is that when you're moving in?
So that's where it gets kind of tricky. I try to kind of not push the envelope too much at home anyways when it comes to that. But if it's like right on that, if I'm getting that picture or whatnot, like right on the fringe of last daylight, I try to backtrack, so to speak. Like, did he move 50 yards? Did he move 150 yards? And try to cut him off before he gets to that pinch point or as he's coming through it.
I gotcha. Okay. So I want to ask you guys this question because this is something that I feel like I've noticed, and it could just be the area I hunt. So the pre-rut time frame for myself, and I want to preface this for listeners. There's lots of different ways to hunt and kill bucks. In this podcast, we're going to present, kind of various ways. We each have our individual tactics, but we'll kind of give you a good overall picture of all these rut-based tactics, and then you guys can kind of utilize what's going to work best in your area and during the time frame in which you choose to hunt. All of these are going to work, by the way. Everyone here is, killed deer. For the pre-rut for myself is typically when I like to target a buck. So for myself and the area that I hunt, I feel like it is my best time before the rut really kicks in. Now, I said earlier we can you can target a specific buck during, when the rut gets hot and heavy. We'll get into that. But for a lot of the areas I hunt, I feel like that pre-rut time frame is my time to capitalize. I've just noticed that it seems like some of the more mature deer are some of the ones that are first moving, and they're picking up those first few does coming in. And I don't know if you guys have noticed that. I've noticed that, especially on the private piece that I have that I hunt in Ohio. That's like October 25th through the 30th. Like something's going to come through there. And in previous years, I'm pretty sure it's because there's been a doe that'll come in early, and these bucks will cruise through there and check on that doe in this doe group. But I feel like that's a really good time to capitalize on some of these deer. Now I think it is location dependent. May not be every doe group, may not just be anywhere, but that area that I like to target on that private piece, for example, it's right outside a thick bedding cover. The thick bedding cover is over on the neighbors, but the does will travel onto our property, and then right on that transition line, there we have like a 2-track, but and then it goes into another edge. So it's like the first opening, and then I have a big mock scrape on where these trails converge. So there's like a very good visual for any of the bucks coming through there. It's just a solid little spot, nice little habitat funnel there, and it just seems like a lot of the more mature deer will come through there earlier in the rut. I mean, they'll come in later, but I feel like I can really capitalize on harvesting one of them in that pre-rut time frame. Do you guys see anything similar? I feel like even in other areas, not on that private piece, I feel like some of the larger bucks or more mature bucks, I'll catch them early, moving in daylight, trying to pick up some of those early does.
They seem like they're always the first ones to start seeking out those first available does. And something that I always keep on record, whether it's on paper, on my phone, or in the back of my mind, is where did I see that chasing activity last year start up, and what were the dates? Like I can refer back to a place I hunt in Indiana, and 2 years in a row, on October 30th, I was in there and had a great mature deer chase a doe right by me. Couldn't get him to stop. He come back by 2 hours later, bumping the same doe. And the very next year, by coincidence, I didn't even think about it, I was back in there that same exact afternoon, and almost the same exact thing happened. Didn't get a shot, come running by me, and he didn't come back by again. But just taking a mental note of where you're seeing that stuff happen, regardless of the temperature, regardless of the moon phase and stuff like that, it has been pretty, I wouldn't say successful, but you're always putting yourself in a good spot when you're doing that.
I would agree with that. Over the years, I really like to let SD cams sit and soak, especially in those areas where I'm expecting some rut movement, or the areas like Jake was talking about, those doe groups and setting up cameras in certain areas. I'll let them sit, from October to the end of the year, because like you were saying, Emery, you'll pick up that rut activity on different time frames, and I feel like it is because of those does. Those does start coming in, and those bucks know they have, especially the more mature deer, they have a bead on those doe groups. And as these different does will come in, you'll see the activity pick up, and it's not all at once, right? The rut doesn't happen. Not all the does will come in at one time. They'll kind of vary, and it might be mid-October here in the Midwest all the way up until into December. You'll get some of those younger does, the fawns that eventually come in, right? And same in the South too, right? You guys have that. You may have more of a trickle rut, and it's kind of all over. And those I'd imagine it. I can see why you have that tactic down south, Jake, on leaving those cameras in different areas, because I would imagine you're able to pick out these different dates and different locations and just bounce around to those doe groups.
Yep. I've seen exactly the same thing. And I think the reason the mature bucks are the ones that we see coming through first is because they've been around for multiple seasons. They know, that where the 2 or 3 year olds ain't picked up on that yet. So 2 of my biggest bucks ever have came on the exact day that I had them either on camera or seen with my eyes the year before. I mean, the exact day, the exact time. I mean, and Chris, I think you might have seen that video, that big buck rushed a shot on this year. It was like a 150s Alabama buck. I was on some better deer, but I left those deer to hunt this spot because he was there that day, last year. And sure enough, he came right through like he did last year, checking those doe groups. He wasn't on it though. He had his nose, and you could tell. You watch the deer's body language, you know what he's doing, and he was doing the exact same thing a year later. It's not a coincidence.
Last year, 2 years ago, excuse me, on November 1st, in an area, I remember it was 82 degrees that afternoon, and a buddy of mine was hunting, I don't know, 400 or 500 yards from me, and we encountered this buck. I call him the horse buck, and he chased a doe right, 100 yards from me. I snort wheezed at him, he snort wheezed back. I'm like, I'm fixing to shoot this deer, and it just didn't work out. Lo and behold, this year, November 1st, mental note, I should probably be somewhat in that area. And I found myself in the middle of the most monotonous open timber. Chris would cringe if he saw where I said,
Hey, I remember the video. I was like, wonder why he sat up there.
it was literally like I was in between where he come from and where I was last year. And here he come. And I shot him for 20, and he turned out to be 36.
Oh man.
So is that the one pin that covers 20 to 40?
No, it's my life. I didn't even have to say it. That's so awesome.
My defense, you assholes. I mixed them by this much. The length of my pecker is what I mixed it by. So 15 yards, I was off by 4 or 5 inches.
Hey, a clean miss is always better than a bad hit.
That's true.
Oh, dude, you are not kidding about that. That pretty much sounds about like the one I did. That was rough.
Mm-hmm. I want to point out something that you said, Emery. Even like with temperature and that doesn't matter. Some people will stay out of the woods when it's hot. Especially in Ohio, we've had some hot, first weeks in November here.
Yep.
So right when the rut is ramping up, and some people stay out. Now, Chris has an experience with this.
I had some guys come up from Georgia actually to hunt with me. We had a little trade-off. I told them I was going to hook them up and show them a little bit of public. This is when I didn't know anything about the public. And then I had some private farms here, and he kept asking about the one because I had some good deer on it. And I was like, I mean, we can go out there, but I've never seen a mature deer on that farm. I think this week, I think it was like mid-80s while they were here. I was like,
God. It was
I would prefer to not go in there and ruin it because I'd like to try to gun hunt it, or at least get some rut time myself in there. And it's hot. Well, when I went in there, when they were here, I had like 160s 8, like a big damn 8.
Oh my goodness.
A huge 8.
It was a big deal.
And he was bedding on the property for the entire week. He was on camera 3, 4, 5 times a day. And this is when I ran corn piles and everything. Like, that deer was there. He was living there for the week. So after that, there was no like, let's just chill out. It's a little warm. And now, like, kind of goes along with what Emery said. I get excited when it gets hot because nobody's going to be like, I don't like sex today. It's too hot for spots, but there's plenty of lazies that won't go. And that is what justifies not getting up in the morning in their head. And then you go out and you get on deer because there's zero pressure. I mean, it's phenomenal.
I feel like it does slump the doe movement. So
Oh,
instead of them, they got to bounce from group to group or area to area to find them.
Yep. I feel like that's a potentially good time to hunt some of those water sources during the rut, like especially if it was like in between doe bedding groups and stuff.
Yep.
Last year, in the same area I killed my Ohio buck last year on this piece of public, and I didn't know about this other deer because I didn't check cameras until later. But it was a really nice deer. I'm hoping he's there again this year. Still have cameras in the area. I've kept the dates in mind because he was all over this area from I want to say October 30th until almost the 10th. He was bouncing around. I mean, it was a very large area, but he was just glued to this spot. The hottest day of the week. Of the week. I want to say, what day was that? Like November 7th or 5th or something last year.
Well, it wouldn't have been the 5th because you didn't get to go hunting that day.
That's right. It was after. Well, maybe it was before that. I don't know. It was on camera. It was the hottest day of the week. It was, again, probably close to like 80 or something.
Yeah.
That buck was in there. I think it was 12:30 in the afternoon, cruising through on camera. So I just want to make that point clear that you can use this trail cam data to figure out when these doe groups are coming in to estrus. And it doesn't matter the weather, like bucks are going to be in there. You know, it may stifle the movement a little bit as far as like some of the doe movement, like Emery said, but the bucks are going to be in there looking for these does. So
you ever wonder if that helps you out, keeping the does more stationary rather than wandering around feeding all over the damn place?
Yeah, well, I think it was like Emery said, it stifles their movement, and so the bucks are going to have to move a little bit more in between these groups, right? Because they're not kind of spread out, dispersed, doing their thing. You know, I think it definitely can help.
I'll be chasing them when it's 50 for a damn high,
Yeah,
but
not 30. Be like 50.
So let's go ahead and roll into from the pre-rut into kind of the rut. We're starting to see some chasing in that, right? I guess here in the Midwest, we'll say that first week of November. So let's put this a little bit in a better reference. So everything we were talking about before, kind of in that last week of October, before really the chasing gets hot and heavy. Now we're getting into that first week of November here. Chasing's really picking up. We're seeing a lot of chasing in the woods. Jake, it may be different down there, but for terminology purposes, so it's
seeking.
cohesive. Yeah, well, seeking, chasing, we're getting into that stuff. And we were kind of alluding to earlier using cameras to identify these doe groups and using that data to kind of bounce around to these different doe groups in order to hunt these bucks. So Jake, how do you utilize that tactic? Once we get into the chasing, once we're in that phase and you utilize that data that you gathered from the putting out those cameras, what are you doing?
I'm finding the places where I'm seeing the buck I'm wanting to hunt the most, and it's time to be in the woods. It's time in the tree. You know, we talked about Bobby Worthington earlier. He's a big rut hunter, and he'll tell you, hey, it's when it's time, you better be in the woods. It doesn't matter if it's, like we said, hot or cold or whatever. You got to be in there. But if, you know, say I go hunt a funnel and in the morning and I don't see anything, well, I'm sneaking to the next one where I've got cameras and I'm checking cameras on the fly. You know, I'm still hunting. I'm sneak hunting, stalk hunting or whatever. And if I see a buck, you know, on the camera that was there the day before or that morning or something right there, I'm knowing he ain't far, just because I know where the does bed. I know where they travel. I know he's not going to be far. He doesn't have to go far, especially if he's on a doe. You know, if I see a buck come through and he's got a doe in front of him, his nose is to the ground, and I mean that's what I'm doing. And that's when I say that's how I can kind of pattern them during the rut is in Alabama, especially if, you know, if I check a camera today and he's on there today or he was on there yesterday, I'm setting up there for the foreseeable future. I'm gonna stay in there until he comes back by again. And that's usually, you know, the way I kill them. I mean, it's worked, you know, more than once. I just think once the mature buck has got the doe that he's wanting, he's not going to get run off. He's going to stay with her, and she's not going to go far. She may zigzag and run a bunch, but she's not going to run very, very far, you know, like people think. I used to be that way because, you know, people got in my head where, you know, I tell them, you know, hey, I got this buck running this doe and all this stuff. And you hear it on TV too. It's like, oh, well, there's no telling where that buck's at now. You know, they're just running around crazy. And I always had that mindset. And when I started really paying attention to the cameras and the times I didn't capitalize where I'd be like, nope, I'm not. I know this deer was here yesterday, but I'm still going to this spot because I feel good about it. The cameras will tell you that. Well, he was there the next day, and another thing, you can't really, the cameras just pick up a skosh of what's going on. I've, been where I'm waiting on a buck to come through, and I'll see 3 other bucks that I didn't even know were in the woods, around me, and they didn't even walk in front of the camera. So it's a double-edged sword, but I really pay attention to the cameras during the rut, because if I do get a buck on there, I'm staying in that area.
Have you ever noticed like a circuit that they'll run?
Yes, big time in Alabama. I have all the mark where my cameras are, and all my cameras are usually in some type of rut funnel because I'm always getting ready for the rut. So I post out, draw out the line of where he's running and what time he's coming through, and trying to figure out how to cut him off. And there's just really not really a way to cut him off unless you get in that circuit and you stay. And you might hunt 7 days without seeing him, but he's going to come through it. That's how confident I am, man. I've just seen it too many times. But if I get too stir crazy and I've got to get down, that's when I'll start stalking to each kind of funnel. Because you think about it, when you're hunting, you go hunting today and you don't see anything. The whole time you're sitting there not seeing anything, you're thinking, man, I should have went somewhere else. I should have went to this other bench or saddle. Well, doing the way I'm talking about, you can do that. You can hunt all those places at once. So you may do a morning hunt to 11, get down and start stalking to the next one, start stalking to the next one. Just keep doing that. And I've run into them. I've stalked silently, listen, sit down, have deer come in on me. I've got there at the same time, when I got, I've shot a lot of deer doing that. And so when I say I run the circuit, that's how I do it. I pretty much do what he's doing, except he's hunting does, I'm hunting him, but we're all kind of, hunting something. I've sat in the saddle one time, and a 17-inch wide 6-point come up the saddle and bedded right beside me. And like, I see his head and my head's like right here, and we're sitting there doing the same thing. He's watching this saddle for does to come through, and he's right there with me. And I'm on the ground, and he has no idea I'm there. And he's just, and sure enough, I've seen him make eye contact with other bucks that come through. And he don't want no part of it. He just lays down. They see each other. They're doing exactly what we're doing. If you're quiet and stealthy enough, you could bump into them that way.
Yeah.
Nice. Do you find that these bucks are the bigger mature bucks are a lot more calculated and less chaotic?
Yes.
Because it seems like when I hear people talk about the rut, kind of what Josh said, like they just picture deer just flying through the woods all over the place. And I feel like when I see that, it's all the young, dumb idiots just running the does to death. And then you see big old Mr. Knish come down and just take the doe. Like, okay, thanks, buddy. You wore her out. I'm going to go handle it from here.
You're dead on that. Even the mature bucks I'm thinking of, if I don't see them with my eyes and I see them on camera, they're not chasing them. And the does aren't running usually. They're, he's just kind of keeping his distance and following. Like, hey, well, she's going to stop when she's ready. Because he knows as soon as he starts amping up and starts coming on a little strong, she's going to take off, and he don't want that. So yeah, I've definitely noticed that.
All right.
It makes sense to me. With the tactics we're talking about and trying to target specific bucks during the rut time frame. I mean, I feel like I've seen it too. It's just those mature deer. Like I feel like you can target them in the rut, because from what I've seen, mature deer seem to be very calculated during the rut. They're not. I mean, sure, they may, get a little love crazy for a doe that's just a tease and run around with them. But for the most part, I feel like they have a good beat on the doe groups in the area, because some of them will shift and they'll have their summer area and their fall area, and their fall areas where they tend to rut and everything, and it's only so big generally, and in that area they know all the doe groups, so they'll go from doe group to doe group, make these circuits. And I definitely feel like if you have the data, especially some historical data, you can you can capitalize on a specific target buck.
Yep.
So I also wanted to to ask, and this question goes for you, Emery. So we just talked about targeting specific buck, kind of running these circuits. But also earlier we had mentioned, collecting that historical data in order to figure out dates of when these doe groups are coming in to time frame or these areas are lighting up with rut activity.
Mhm.
Do you guys ever kind of anticipate that? So for that spot in Ohio, I was talking about earlier, that private piece. I know if I get there, like if I get a buck on camera in daylight, I'm already too late. Because that's just how the property sets up. They may come through again at some other point in time, but it's a lot harder to pick and choose when, because just how everything sets up, and a lot of the neighbors run cord piles and all that stuff. But I will have a pretty good idea, and I'll use weather and all those factors to calculate this. But over the years, I've gotten good at, okay, if I go in now, I think I'm going to get here the day he's going to show up in daylight. So I'm trying to anticipate that movement and get there before he shows up on daylight and on camera in daylight. And really just, you can apply that to different areas, right? Getting there, whether it be historical data. That's how I know it on that spot, is historical data. So do you guys ever do that? If you know, like this area last year, November 2nd, there was 3 bucks running in there chasing after a doe, all of them good bucks you would shoot. Without any camera data, are you like, I'm going to go hit this area because I know within, these couple days, something's going to run through there.
100%. I'm almost to the point where the cameras now aren't for, catching them doing this or that. They're for intel. I just need to know they're alive. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
At least with places that I'm used to and I call home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like year after year, they produce each and every single time. The 2 hunts I've talked about, the October 30th in Indiana, in the November 1st area, in Kentucky. There's, I'd have to pull up my laptop, but I've got names for the spots, and it's just like, this is when this deer was just in here nonstop for days at a time. And it's like, all I can think is, it's because the does in that area they're really, really close, or they're ready, one of the two.
Man, this is encouraging to hear, because I'm not a big rut guy. And
Yeah, you like early season. I figured this conversation would be up your alley and give you some hope.
well, I mean, you start trying to figure out, like our place we're trying to figure out in Kentucky, for example, like you get a few places, and it's not something where I feel like I'm going to go out this year and just be a hero and just mow down the deer, but give me 5 years of camera intel and hunting intel and everything. And then all of a sudden, maybe you do go to 3, 4, 5 states and knock a few good ones down, because you can do that in November. It's really tough to do that in early season, because early season, if you don't have intel, from the summer or right at the get, hope you find good sign. Hope you got the right situation that you just fall into, because it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
The rut is magical.
Yeah, I feel like the RUT is when I use the most historical data from cameras.
Yeah.
That is when I feel like it applies the most. That's just my opinion. That's why on these different public places, I'll leave cameras out, let them soak. I need to get better at writing these down on when they pop up. I try and keep them in my head, but I'm running out of room, and I just need to write them down.
Yeah. Yep.
I think we had this
It's your-
conversation today.
It's your spreadsheet.
Oh, was it you two, Emery and Chris?
I think so. I never write anything down ever.
I know.
I'm like, I'll remember. And
Yeah.
like 8 months later, I'm like, son of a bitch, where was that? No, it wasn't writing stuff down. We were talking about recording pictures, taking pictures,
Yes, when you
and
drop
putting them in our.
on X or Spartan Forge, take a damn picture of what the pin is. I deleted like 300 pins the other day because I was like, I don't even know what these are. I have no idea, no freaking idea what they are.
Like now I try to like put as much detail in them as I can
Yeah.
because I'm literally like an old man with Alzheimer's walking through the woods where like, so I wonder why I put that pin here.
Yeah.
What is this?
I think we've all done that.
I
Yeah.
dropped one today and I said, Chris is full of shit on good.
I want to see your OnX notes, Chris. Notes in just real life, like in your notepad. And then I've seen you read it and you go, I'm not sure what I meant here.
I just like jot down a word or maybe a phrase and then
Yeah.
come back and I'm like, ah, shit.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've hit on pre-rut. Going into the rut that first week, and we can get into some seeking and chasing. Let's go ahead and move on as far as the time frame. I do want to go back and hit on some of these funnels and kind of classify how we might be getting these deer in a specific location in order for us to shoot, right? But let's move on. Let's move on to in the Midwest. We're getting into that second or third week in November lockdown time frame, or what most would consider lockdown time frame. What are you guys doing during that time of year? And I'm going to be honest and upfront. Typically, I'm done by then, so I don't have much experience there.
I'm done. I'm tagged out.
Do you have your top hat and cane with you?
Well,
Your
I want to rephrase this. When I was younger, and we primarily just hunted the rut. If we didn't get it done in the first 2 weeks, we were kind of done anyway. And then now, since I am a little older and hunt, I guess, a little more, I try and be done before then because I don't like the late season too much. That's just me. So, admittingly, I don't have much experience once we get into the lockdown or and here in the Midwest towards like Thanksgiving where some things will ramp up again. But what are your guys' experience with that?
So this is that period, that time period. It's like the 12th, well, let's say the 15th through the 21st is when I see like most of my deer kind of they've disappeared off cameras. They're hanging low.
Yep.
They've got their girls and they probably ain't got to move very damn far for the next one. That's that time that I pick my favorite funnel and I'm going to grind it for 3 or 4, 5 days in a row. And it is the most boring freaking crap you can do if they're not moving much. But that's, once he's done with that one doe and he's pushed her on to a spot that he can defend her.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like he's hanging out in the doe bedding area with her. Most of the time they're off in a really weird location. He's going to get up and go look for his next girlfriend. And that's when I'm normally waiting in that funnel, hopefully to get a shot at him. And it can be, like I said, boring. You could have a lot of action. You never really know. You got the opportunity to either see a lot of deer or see the deer.
I gotcha. So to clarify for the listeners, when you talk about how are you choosing the funnel? You said your favorite funnel. How are you choosing that one in order to sit for a while?
So that's all like historical, like boots on the ground experience wise. I can look at a map and most of the time I'm pretty good about picking out a barrier, some form of water, blowdowns. I mean, we could go on and on and on about the different things that you will make a deer walk around it, a creek, a slough, pick those out. And kind of like Bobby Worthington was talking about, whether it's in that book or on the latest podcast, it's like stack as many odds in your favor of that would make them travel through that spot, whether that's, you got bedding areas on both sides or the destination food source on this side and bedding areas on this side. And the does are going to get up and head to the food and they're going to be following them through there or coming out off the the freaking cornfields or bean fields or native fields in the dark, you know, coming back through that to go bed or chase or whatever they want to do. If you find a spot where they've got a pinch down, and you got to be kind of careful with it. It may be different for Jake, but I've learned that if you got a 3-way funnel, it's always best, but you can't pinch them down too tight, because the 4-year-old, 5-year-old deer, they won't do it. They will not. They don't give a crap. It's the middle of November. They will not put themselves in that position to go through that danger spot. It's got to be the perfect width. It's got to have the perfect security cover on both sides of it. In my eyes, I'm picturing 2 drainages coming down with water on both sides. I'm just making this up. And God, I'm trying to
2 drainages or 2 ridges?
Well, I guess you could really take either one of them, really.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you've got something on both sides of them, that's the big thing.
Okay.
I'm really bad at explaining this out. If I could show you on X, give me 10 seconds.
So tell me what a RUT funnel actually is, because
You better ask Jake.
everybody's like, I use RUT funnel. And I'm like, what the hell is that?
Here's the thing: nothing's going to be exact. There's going to have to be some guessing in there. You're not going to be dead dog accurate. You're going to have to literally pick one that's been on fire recently. That's what I do, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it don't. I think that just because we're talking about the Midwest, I've got to take this Kentucky buck that I got last year and just kind of go through it with that. The week before I shot him, I had him at 10 yards with my bow on the ground. I've been hauling around in a saddle. And it was basically a saddle, but it was close to the doe bedding area that I'd found in early September, or September and October. There's a thicket there, you know, at the saddle. There's 3 things come to one, but I've got other places where 3 things come to one, and they're not as hot as this saddle. So I went there, and I hauled around trying to figure out what the wind was going to do. And I finally pick a tree, and I'm standing on my platform, got the bow on the ground. I hear a rattlesnake behind me. He's right behind me. So I start videoing the rattlesnake, and then I hear this buck coming off the ridge, and it's the exact buck I'm there for. I mean, it's him, and he's coming right to me. The leaves are loud, you know, I couldn't pick up my bow, and he gets 11 yards, no kidding. I can hear him breathing. He comes across my ground center where I was walking around trying to pick the tree and look at the wind. So I just pick up my phone. It's on the Mobile Hunter Facebook page, and I videoed him. And he looked at me, looked at the snake, because you could hear the snake crawling across the ground, and he looks back up at me, you know, on this platform. And I'm like, nothing but my phone in my hand. And he takes out of there. So I knew right then he didn't have a doe with him, but I knew why he was there, because I know the direction he was heading, the direction I walked in. I probably hunted there 8 times the whole season. I saw does there every time I come through. I would either jump them, or they would come in and bed beside me, or they would pass through. Every single time there's does in there. I knew that's why he was in there. So the next week I come back, I take off work, and it's raining, and I had my son-in-law and my buddy with me, and I said, I'm gonna go in there. I think this buck's in here. I mean, the does are in there, and I saw him 7 days ago. But again, it's in that lockdown phase, like you're asking about, Josh. And so I went in there, and I was going to go right to that tree where I saw him. And I started getting in there. It's raining. It's warm. I got this shirt on. I mean, literally a short sleeve shirt on. It's warm. And I get almost to that tree. I'm probably 150, 200 yards from that tree, and the wind's not doing what I thought it was going to do, because the storm kind of messed everything up. So I kind of eased back, and I was like, I'm gonna set up right here in these doe beds, like right where I always see them bedded down and jump them and stuff. And sure enough, I set up in those doe beds, and I'm covering everything. Just trying to keep from getting wet. And here he comes up. He's going to cross the top of that saddle. He was with 2 does, and ended up getting him. And that was in the lockdown phase. 7 days before, he was by himself looking for does when I had him at 11 yards. And I mean, I went there because it was hot the week before. But like you said, lockdown could be kind of tough, because if they've got them, they're not having to move very far. But again, it's a good funnel where three or four things come together. There's always does in there, and that's why I picked it. I could have went to another funnel and maybe had success on another buck. I don't know. I mean, sometimes it works out, sometimes it don't. But if you try to put as many things in your favor as you can, and really remember where those does are, I mean, that's all you can hope for.
Mm-hmm.
I dig it.
Yeah, so it sounds like you guys are doing similar things, picking some of your best spots, good funnels, and just grinding it out, like you said, Emery, until you get a buck that you're after coming through.
I'm tired of being fake. I mean, I live in one of the best states in the U.S. for deer. I just get lucky literally every year. I don't know what I'm doing.
It's a big part of it, man. Luck is a big part of the game.
Yep.
Chris. Chris, I wanted to answer your question when you were asking what a funnel is. How I put it in my head is just, it could be terrain features, it could be habitat, anything that kind of narrows down or focuses deer movement.
All right, so like a pinch.
Yeah, same thing. Most people, when they're referring to a pinch, they're referring to a funnel too.
Yeah, that's my definition of it. I mean,
the Doberman's over here giving me
he's
examples. The pinch king.
We don't have Splinter with us. He'd be pulling it up on the computer and everything.
Oh yeah.
No, he wouldn't. I'd give wife up for I gave up this spot.
So I want to hit on some of these funnels. We hit on them a little bit. I just want to clarify some of them with the listeners, because some people will only view funnels as certain things, like a saddle, or like some sort of bench that comes off a ridge. Just, they have a very kind of rigid thought of what a funnel is. But that Bobby Worthington podcast on the Southern Outdoorsman that we've referenced, he does a really good job of explaining and talking about these different funnels. And Bobby's got a really good view on funnels. Like he'll follow all these trails, and it's like, okay, where all these trails converge, that's kind of your funnel point. And it a lot of times it happens to be around these different features, but he's more focused on all that movement coming into one area. I've noticed if I'm out hunting, I'll try and pick out terrain features, and it could be. So I'm going to use that piece I killed that buck off of last year on that piece of public. So there was a creek bottom, and there were two small ridges on either side. Both ridges were kind of these big grown up native fields. The bottom was fairly thick in this one area, and then it kind of opened up. But these ridges dumped down into this low area right on the edge of the thicket. Then there was a like tributary off of the main creek on one side. So in between were those ridge points where there wasn't really trails coming off of. One, because the one ridge ran up on the private, and there was a big like box blind up there, so the deer were avoiding that. And then on the other one, there was a trail going up it, but also one going around it, and I think they would go around it more often. So there were trails going around these two ridge points. So it kind of funneled the movement in between those two ridge points and on the edge of this thicket. So that was, and I had a camera down there. I set up a mock scrape in that bottom on the edge of the thicket there. Had bucks. The buck I killed was on that camera. The one I mentioned earlier, that was a nice buck moving, in the middle of the day when it was hot. He was on that camera. But that is an example of kind of a terrain feature that funnels movement. We had those two ridge points coming down. And also there was some habitat diversity there, creating some edge that the deer would follow. So compounding features is what was going on there. But there are other instances, and I'm sure you guys have noticed them, where it might be, I've looked at just pure habitat, just diversity, where you'll have like two different habitat types maybe come together, or three, and they're creating these different edges, and all those edges meet at one point. That is something I would, target and consider like a funnel.
Man-made things as well.
Yes.
Bridges, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and funnel is a funnel, whether it's a rut, during the rut or not. People say rut funnels, but saddle's always there. It's there, all year. So I think when people decipher rut funnels, I think when I think of a rut funnel is I'm not really in those funnels early season. So I hit those funnels, those saddles, those benches, and everything during the rut, and it's usually closer to does. And I think that's why we call them rut funnels. I wouldn't really sit the big saddle where I shot the deer early season, just because it's kind of it's out, where I had him. It was out in the open, and I think the only reason he was out in the open was during the rut. I never got him in there, but before the rut. But yeah, I mean, a funnel's a funnel, whether it's during the rut or not. But I think, and too, the funnels are going to be different in Kentucky than they are in Alabama, like mountains, like where it's a lot steeper. I think they use them a lot more drastically in Alabama or in the mountains anywhere than they do in just regular hills, because they have to. And I've heard many theories behind it, but it's easier for them to conserve energy, check a bunch of things a lot easier, and move from point A to point B a lot easier. And I think that's why I sit those during the rut more, because I know they're going to use them during the rut more.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. And personally, I feel like some of the best funnels are kind of like what I mentioned earlier. They're compounding features. So there's different things that are going to funnel the deer movement into that spot, and it could be like, I'm thinking of a spot that Chris and I scouted with Jake Bush and Corey Godar, was it last year, whatever, in Kentucky. Remember that bench we found that shed on, Chris, that
Yep.
I have. So there was a bench that came around this ridge, and it connected right into a saddle.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, there was another like 2-track. So it was just like you have like these two different benches coming together and meeting at this saddle, and we could tell, we were in there. I mean, it was postseason, but there was a lot of feed sign in there. You could tell there was
Covered in feed sign.
Yep. Probably lots of does in the area, and there was a ton of sign on that bench. There were rubs, scrapes, so stuff like that really sticks out to me when it comes to funnels, like multiple factors that are contributing to deer movement. Our buddy Tyler Westall, he's out of state. He's really good at getting on deer quick, and I think he looks at those compounding features, and he gets on deer quick during the rut out of state. Some of the stuff I know he looks for, let's say he likes to look at clear cuts that meet at a saddle. So you'll have, and if you have like a bench that runs into it, even better. But you'll have the terrain, right? You may have a bench and the saddle, and then you'll also have the hard edge line from the different habitat diversity meeting at that saddle. So you have all these compounding features right there, and that's an area where he may target.
I'll tell you something cool I'd like to add about benches. I'm thinking one bench of mine in Alabama. It's a very long bench, and I hunted it in different spots throughout the years I've been hunting out there, and I just recently found the sweet part of it. Like I would see bucks, cruising the various places I'd hunt the bench, but I found this one spot on the bench where instead of being a flat bench, it goes flat and then it kind of dips uphill a little bit. Well, I scouted it one day in the rain, and I saw just numerous doe beds in there. So going back in there, and literally I hunted it for like 5 days straight, and in all 5 of those days there was does bedding on that little knob, and literally the first day I hunted I saw 7 bucks, and the biggest one was like 115-inch, but it wasn't a huge buck, but I've been hunting that saddle literally for years, and I just found that little spot where it lips up and those does bedded on it. So now I home in there, and that's where all the kind of rut activity is kind of focused on, where that little knob of where those does bed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the spot within the spot. You find a bench, hey, that's good, but you got to find something like that on the bench.
Yeah,
Pretty neat.
Spot within the spot is a really good way to hone in on a larger funnel, so to speak, if you will.
Yeah. The micro level.
Yeah. So for another thing that I like to do, if it's kind of a fairly wide area, that might be the funnel. So like that spot I was talking about on that public in Ohio, where those 2 ridges come down to that creek bottom, there were multiple trails crossing the creek there. So it was fairly wide. I believe Bobby Worthington would call it like a soft funnel.
Yep.
What I did there on that, and like I said, it was kind of I was right on the edge of like a thicket in the bottom there. I put that mock scrape there to try and hone the movement even more, right? And it was where multiple trails converged, but I put that there to make that the spot within the spot. Now, I don't think you can do that on all these funnels, but I think on some of them you can. So that worked for me in that area.
Nice.
I do want to hit on quickly. We've been talking kind of different terrain and hilly terrain, and I want to hit on quickly when there's no terrain, just flat like ag country. I don't know how much experience you may have with this, but in those instances, what I like to look for is maybe that habitat diversity. Those, like I said earlier, those different habitats coming together, creating different edges that all meet at kind of one point or close to one point. That's something I look for in that flat ag country.
Ditches.
Yeah.
Or sloughs.
Yeah. Small ditches or sloughs, something like that. It could be, you got a bend in like a small creek or something. You got a tree or debris down. The deer have to go around it.
Yep.
Something like
That's kind of like a spot within a spot. Like if you find a funnel, cool. You find that, giant tree that's fallen down in that funnel. It's like you've now created like that's exactly where I'm going to shoot that deer when he walks right around this thing.
Yep.
I was just showing Chris an example, like in flat, it's literally lowland area. Got like a field, and a slough beside it, and then another field to the north. And it's like these deer, it's like a T funnel, so to speak. Like they're not going to walk right across that wide open field.
Yeah.
They're not going to walk through neck deep water. They're going to come right through there, and vice versa. The same thing going east to west.
How much distance do you want in between, one part of the funnel versus the other? Like one side versus the other? Like obviously you don't want a 20-yard wide funnel.
No,
so
I mean,
is 60 good enough, you think? Or
it's like it's got to be. I mean, I don't. It can be anything. They may do whatever, but like I feel like they're more comfortable when you get to that 75 to 150 yard wide range.
Okay.
Now, if you got a 150 yard wide so-called funnel, and you put yourself smack dab in the middle of that, you've got 75 yards to both sides. Well, just assume that deer is going to be walking within 10 or 15 yards of those outside edges. Then he's at what, 45, 50.
Yeah.
And by that time, just base your setup off of like where the most travel is through that, and you're golden most of the time.
Maybe catch buck sign going through there
Exactly.
or something.
Always carry your grunt call.
Oh,
Come on over
Yeah.
here.
I think it can depend. That the private piece that I have in Ohio, like I said earlier, you get this transition off of like thick bedding cover. Then there's an opening. It's literally a UTV trail, and then there's another. It's like a small thicket, so it might be like 20 yards across. But they'll come in that trail, and then that's why I have that mock scrape there. The trail like splits and converges. One is where the UTV trail continues, another is another deer trail that goes on. But right where they meet, I have a big mock scrape there. So if they come out in the opening, bam, they see that visually. If it's a north wind, they're getting hit in the face with whatever scent is on there, and then they'll go right to it. So that's a pretty condensed zone for them to be in.
Nice.
So moving on, we were hitting lockdown. So let's get out of lockdown here. In the Midwest, this might be around that Thanksgiving up to like the 1st of December time frame. I don't consider this lockdown. Some people might consider it a secondary rut. I don't consider that the secondary rut personally. I still think it's part of this like initial rut, but I do feel like in that time frame around here, and like I said earlier, those more mature bucks are some of the first ones I feel like I see moving around getting does during this time frame. I feel like in Thanksgiving, I feel like you just see hammers posted online.
agreed.
Same around here too.
Yeah, it's like those mature bucks. It's like, okay, all these younger bucks are kind of, they've been running around, running these does ragged. Those mature bucks, methodical, analytical. I mean, they don't have a thought process and are analytical, but there's a method to what they're doing. And now they're just going, searching for those last few does that there are available to breed. So I feel like I said earlier, I personally don't have experience there, but from what I've seen, what some buddies have gotten on deer, I feel like it's a really good time frame to get back on those bucks.
I've only killed a handful of deer in that last week of November, but like you said, they're looking for those last few receptive does, and the yearlings they're right there, they're close. So you're basically getting those yearling does that can be bred that year. They're kind
First
of
estrus.
they're in that late October, early time frame. So it's like it's all happening all over again and creating a perfect storm. Whereas they're getting the chance to breed more does for the first time. They're getting the chance to breed does that didn't get knocked up the first time around the November 1st time frame. And they're still catching some that are just now coming in. It's like a triangle. Like and that's the best time to be, where the places that I hunt, that I've noticed it, both Indiana and Kentucky.
Agreed. Again, the biggest buck of my life was January 15th, and that's I think a 40, 50 pound doe brought him to me. And it was literally their first estrus. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And I saw him there the day before. And sure enough, he came through the saddle the next day. And I kind of don't want to go backwards, but we were talking about saddles, and a lot of times you're not going to find like a crazy trail across the saddle, because I think when they come up to it, they cross it in many different places. So what I do, especially during the second rut, like what we're talking about, is I'll start messing with my cameras even more, because I know, kind of like you said, some of these mature bucks are like, hey, this is it. I've got to find them. They start checking scrapes again and all that. So I'll take my favorite saddle that I have in Alabama. I'll have 4 cameras across the top of that saddle. Like when this camera goes off, I can see the other camera in the background, because you don't really know where they're crossing it, but I want to see what's going through there.
Right.
And what they do is they cross at many different places, and then once they get off the side of the saddle and they start going down the hill, where they're all crossing, you'll see a big trail converge down there on the other side. And that's also downwind. So that's kind of how I started getting on these bigger deer. I was hunting the top of the saddle, which is one good place. But when I dropped off the side of the saddle, I can still see what's coming over the top, but I can also see what's just walking down. Because the whole length of that saddle and scent checking. And that's what he was doing. I mean, there was no doubt about it. You can do, and that's what the one that I shot at this year was doing. So yeah, you got to get off the side of those saddles. But again, like we were talking about, they start really getting after those yearling does first estrus and the does that didn't get bred. So whenever I'm checking those cameras and I see one, it's like, okay, I know because I ain't gonna say it's better, but they seem to do. I tend to see a mature buck in Alabama do the same thing multiple days in a row than I do any other time of the year at that time.
Yep.
And that's hard. I mean, for me, I talk to a lot of good hunters, and there's not, they'll all kind of tell you the same thing. It's hard to see a mature buck do the same thing twice, in a row. And that's for me too. So whenever I get into this time zone, it's like, this is about the only time I feel like I can pattern somewhat.
Wow.
Jake, I want to ask you something. Do you feel like deer are more patternable, big deer that you're targeting in them and trying to kill? Do you feel like they're easier to kill during the rut with a high deer density or a low deer density?
Where I'm hunting, it's not a high deer density. Now there is a lot of those. I would say a lot more. The areas I'm hunting, I mean, you look at the numbers. I don't really want to give out counties or anything, but it's not a high density.
Okay.
So, I mean, I can only go by my experience.
So the only private farm that I have in Kentucky that I have access to do whatever I want to with is 100 acres. It's not big, and it's more long than it is wide. It's super tough to access. and there are so many damn deer on it. Like it's frustrating because I feel like I don't see as many bucks as I should, but it's like when the one that I want to kill calls it home, it's good because
Good.
he's not leaving
Yep.
because he's got to walk freaking 200 yards to find the next doe group. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yep.
The deer I killed in 2018 was just he ran rampant all over that place from November 1st to November 10th when I finally killed him.
Hmm.
I mean, like 10 encounters before I finally shot him. But
Yeah.
it's pretty wild, but super high deer density there. I thought it would actually be tougher to target in on a target buck in a low deer density area, just low deer density area, just because he has to move so much further to find does to breed.
Yep. I mean, it's tough whether it's high or low. I would say just any mature buck's hard to kill. But yeah, and but I've done it in Kentucky too. So and where I'm hunting in Kentucky, I'd say it's a high deer density.
Yeah.
So it's these situations different.
Emery, going back to that example where that deer was kind of all in that one area, what was the habitat diversity like?
So it used to be that old growth, beautiful hardwoods that you dream of as a kid. Now you make you want to gag. And they logged it in 2016. Don't look at me that way. They logged it
Cool.
and just left shit laying everywhere, treetops. It was just it's a mess.
Mhm.
They cut a bunch of the oaks out, and they cut a bunch of good timber. So it's all to this day. You've got a few select white oaks in there, a few reds, and the neighboring properties have been cut as well. So there's not a lot of mass crop. So I don't catch the deer in there until about that rut time frame. So that's I've actually got a food plot or two planted in there this year after one specific deer that made me look like an idiot last year, running around there, giving all my cameras to the bird on opening one season. And
Oh, is
right
this the one you like didn't hunt because you were after like the horse buck and all that, and then you came back and checked your cameras?
So me and Stephen Fuller went to that property because I go out there once a year, and I will walk and rattle, and I'll rattle up 7 or 8 bucks. Whether
Jeez.
there's one I want to shoot or not, probably not. Well, I rattled up a buck, shot at him, hit a limb, and I hit him high, and pulled the camera off the tree, threw it in the backpack, went home. Me and him went out on public the next day, and I shot my buck I killed last year. I pulled the card out, checked it, and like there's a mid-80s deer possum.
Oh my god!
Walking around.
Oh,
The thing is, like me and Steve went out there and we dumped 100 pounds of corn and put a cell camera out there to just see like what is alive and using this property at this point. So he proceeded to walk into the corn pile at least once a day. I would say, I don't know, 12 out of the 14 days was in daylight. So the hunt on YouTube with my stepson, I seen the deer that day. And I couldn't shot him if I wanted to. He winded us anyways, but he still kept coming in there. So he's a big old dummy, and I hope he's back.
Jeez.
I'm rooting for you on that one.
Yep.
Jeez.
One of them city limit deer.
There was something I wanted to hit on, and then I lost my train of thought with that 180 class deer you were just talking about.
Right?
I think he is.
Six to midnight.
Okay, so we were talking about this ramp up when we're getting those mature bucks, trying to catch those last few does, and then Emery, you were talking about those young does coming in. I do feel like that week of Thanksgiving here in the Midwest, and then that first week of December is when we start getting some of those young does coming in the estrus. I've had on camera. I've seen camera data where I just hardly any buck movement, and then I get like a random flurry that first week of December, and I'm like, why are all these why are all these bucks just coming through here? And I think it's because of those young does coming in. So post rut, I guess once we get into December here in the Midwest, we're kind of in that post rut time frame. For you, Jake, down south, it's probably later. What would you say, towards the end of January?
Yep.
So are you guys kind of done rut hunting by then? Are you still targeting any of these areas, funnels, anything like that? You're still seeing any chasing?
At that point, most of my cameras are dead. I'm not even getting anything on camera. I'm still hunting. You know, I'm starting to see bucks group up and stuff about that time.
Wow.
But I mean, end of January. That's tough hunting. I've never killed one past January 15th. It's tough. But I have had, you know, some cameras over the years that show a new buck come in for whatever reason, and he's a good buck that I would have shot. Come through at daylight, you know, and it's usually in a thick bedding area, just somewhere where he's kind of laying low. There's no feed really up there on the mountain. I mean, they're up there for cover. There's really no ag around there, so it's really kind of hard to know what they're doing. So I don't really have much on that.
Do you know what they're keying in on food that time of year? Or is it just woody browse and stuff like that, or?
Well, there's a few. There's a little bit of acorns and stuff that, you know, are not totally rotten. And that's one. I'm thinking of one camera. I'm thinking it was a chestnut oak, and you know, I had and spitting all around it for, you know, 5 days when I wasn't there. But man, they're just laying low. I mean, any kind of acorns that are not rotten is what they're eating up there, and maybe some kind of browse.
Chestnut oaks are big here in late season.
Yeah.
Greenbrier, and then kind of, I don't know how you really focus on stump sprouts, because you really got to have like a situate, like you just need to mow over a bunch of trees, I guess. But that would be something I'd look at. But chestnut oaks here is how we find all our shed antlers.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, like I said earlier, for myself, I'm usually done by then, and from what I've seen historically on camera data, and that, I mean, you'll have an outlier here or there, but I feel like once here where we're at in Ohio, once we hit about that second week of December, things are starting to transition back to more like bed to feed, you know, looking for thicker cover as things are getting colder. You may have the occasional young doe come in, but that's really far and few between. And like you said, some of those bucks are grouping back up once you get towards here, towards the end of December. So,
have any of you ever had a doe come in that time though? It's the nuttiest thing in the world.
So me and a friend run cameras religiously on a piece in Kentucky that we both hunt. And there was an instance in February where it was obvious, like a buck at the top of the WMA and the same buck at the bottom of the WMA, 45 minutes later, 2.5 miles as the crow flies. Why the hell would he do that? And just pictures of blurry deer running by, you know, it's wild, but it happens. And I want to stress this. I shot myself in the foot last year, and I will not make this mistake again. Your cameras should almost always be on video mode if they have the freaking opportunity, because you're going to get a picture of a doe, and that's it. I'm going to put a shameless plug in here. I'm excited about these new cameras I'm running from Poultry, the Edge Pro 2s, because they use AI to take a picture of just what you want. If I don't want it to take a picture of raccoons on a bait pile, if I don't want it to take pictures of does,
that's awesome.
I can make it take pictures of only bucks, and it's gonna.
That's awesome. And
where people can come at me.
I completely agree about running video. When I see people post a picture, I'm like, why are you still running this on just a still picture? I mean, because you pick up so much more data. I mean, you can tell why the doe's running. You might, you know, even if you don't see it, you can hear them grunting in the background. Or a deer that's close to trigger the camera triggers it, but then 150 yards behind it, a big buck standing there that would have never triggered the camera. you get to see that. But if it's a still picture, you're never going to see that. I mean, you get 100 times more data having it on video.
Got to run them Tascos on 5 second 23.
I got them too.
Freaking I've got a cell camera on a scrape in a pretty thick spot in Kentucky. And I was showing the guys the other day, something triggered the camera. And if it was a picture, we'd have no idea what it did. They were back off in the brush, 2 really good bucks, eating and just carrying on, doing their thing. And you'd never know. And I've had that like a billion times. You have some little dumbass 2-year-old let the camera off, and 60 yards behind him, you just see big guy. You're like, oh,
I don't even need to see the big guy. 2.5 is good enough for me.
Shit. Hey, Chris,
portion town.
before we move on, I want to. You were talking about those coming in that super late. Where you hunted this year, probably 10 miles down the road, we had 2 giant bucks chase a doe by us while we were turkey hunting in March.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yep. First time and only time I've ever seen that.
Those deer don't actually exist. It's like all the snakes in the South.
Yeah.
I've been everywhere and I can't find a venomous snake. I'm probably gonna die.
I got bit by one.
I'm gonna die. Yeah, you got.
Hey, I'm with you. I'm in the woods a lot down here, and I hardly ever see any snakes. But when I go to that rattlesnake I told you about, I saw him 3 different times.
So you're in his spot too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'd seen him once, and that'd been it.
Yeah. He was so big and old, man. I thought he's probably never seen a hunter, so I kind of let him roll. But he was too close for comfort that one day when he was by my boat.
Was it a timber rattler?
Yep.
Yeah.
Huge. I think you can even count the rattlers in the one of the videos I got. He's just curled up, and and then the next day I was like, I'm gonna go see if he's over there. Sure enough, he's out there sunning by the log. Just that was his area.
Man, people always ask me like, what kind of snake gaiters you wear? Because I'm in Indiana and Kentucky and this craziness over here in Tennessee and Alabama, and I'm like, I just pray. I think God likes me because I never see him. Or maybe I'm just stupid and blind and I walk past them all. They're like, there goes that dumbass again.
But I tell you, once you see one, though, the rest of that day is hell, because you think you have a stick hit your leg. You're like, oh, man, there he is.
I was scouting for Tennessee this year, and I walked over top of water moccasin, and when I turned back around, he nailed the front of my boots.
No kidding.
And I screamed like a bitch.
Oh, I put on a show.
It took me 20 minutes to find a stick because I was too scared to reach down and pick up a stick. And I finally found the one that wasn't rotten, and I killed his ass. It took me 30 minutes to walk to that point. It took me 2.5 hours to walk out.
Wow.
Scared to death.
Yep. That's the way I am when I see them. I hate snakes.
Yeah.
I like them. I haven't been hit by a venomous snake though yet, so
it changes you, bro.
I'm a little different mindset, I guess.
Emery, I remembered what I was going to ask earlier before you distract me with the 180-inch buck.
Oh, sorry.
I had asked you about the habitat diversity in that area because you were talking about the high deer density, and that buck really didn't have to go, too many places. I do feel like that is a thing, because over the past couple of years, I've started to mainly focus on these areas with a lot of habitat diversity. Some old-grown fields, and they'll have oaks, so there's lots of cover, lots of food. The deer don't have to go far to get what they need. And that place in Ohio, that piece of public that I killed my buck off last year, it was like that. And there was a few bucks that just stayed in this area. I mean, I'm talking 50 acres or something, but they were there for weeks. And there was lots of does in the area, and then they had everything. They didn't have to go very far. The buck I killed, and no shame here, he was a 3-year-old, probably someone's nice up and comer that I cut down in its prime.
Charlie Brown's little Christmas tree.
But he was in that area from like the first week in October until I killed him, which was like November 12th or something.
Yeah, because he doesn't make it past the 12th. He's done by then.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
And then that when I checked those cameras, that big deer, like I said, he was in there from October 30th until after I killed my deer. Sometime I think maybe that mid second week of November. So he was in there for a few weeks. Like he just had everything he needed right there.
Yep.
So I do think there is something to that.
I agree wholeheartedly.
So we've covered quite a bit in this podcast. I think we've done a pretty good job.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to hit on before we conclude is another way I think we can potentially target areas during the rut, and that is fawn drops.
Ah,
And I don't know if
Can't count.
I haven't done this yet. I wish Sklinner was on because I know Sklinner will do this, and he's talked about this before. But paying attention to the fawn drop dates in the spring and summer, and correlating that, with the doe groups that they're with, in order to kind of figure out when the rut is kicking off with these doe groups in these areas. Is that something you guys have done? Do you have any experience with that?
Where I'm at with the crop rotation and stuff, even the does aren't summering where they're, hanging out in the fall.
Yeah.
Does me no good. And who really knows how old I know the fawn is. Oh, look, there it is. It can barely walk and it's got spots. Well, it may be a day old. It might be 7 days old. Now, how are you going to correlate that closely? Like, are you watching this thing come out of the womb?
thank you.
So,
Fucking thank you.
I mean,
You get a text from the doe, hey, I'm going into labor. We need to get to the hospital. I'm like, what are these guys all out here? Like, oh, I don't have enough time, but I watched does give birth.
I think it sounds good.
I'm like, dude, who, like, do you know how many fawns I've seen in the woods? Not that damn many.
well, that's not a time that a lot of guys are out there doing anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's too much calculating for my ass. I just know I need to be in a damn tree from November 1st to November 30th.
That's like when guys say that they look for fawn hair in the droppings of a bear or coyote or whatever.
Ooh.
I've heard that shit. And I'm like,
Literally.
get out of here.
Yeah, I think the guys that are talking. I mean, I wish Sklinner was here to hit on this because I know he'll pay attention to this. But I think in his area it might be a little different because it's high pressure, and then if it's wet there where he is, they only have certain areas to go. So I think in certain circumstances you might be able to utilize it. It is kind of a guessing game when you get them on camera as to like how close you could be.
Now, if you're Lee and Tiffany and literally you are living life on those farms and all that, and you are literally keeping tabs on all this. All right. But to find those fawns because the first couple weeks, they just lay there anyways, mostly. Like they're not up gallivanting around anyway. Mommy goes off and eats and does her thing, and you might see them. But like he said, if you're off by 6 days, that's way the hell off.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
I won't say it's impossible. Just going to say not possible for me.
In my opinion, it's a tough way to do it. Maybe possible, but a tough way. I would rather leave cameras in an area, collect historical data, and utilize that and get dates that way.
Imagine asking your wife instead of, can I go hang cameras, or you mind if I hunt this weekend? Do you care if I go search through the woods for baby deer? Do you care if I go National Geographic up a couple does?
Exactly.
Your wife might come with you if you're like, hey, there's baby deer here. Let's go out in the woods.
They don't give a shit.
They don't care.
I do have a couple of subjects I want to hit on.
Oh, okay. Let's go.
We've messed with, and I want to be extremely. We'll just ask. So, scents. Deer scents. Do you use them? Do you think they're effective? And so on. Jake, we'll start with you.
I don't use any sense.
Okay. Why?
I just don't see the need. Like I don't think it's gonna. Even if I'm bow hunting, I need a 30-yard shot or in. I don't think it's gonna persuade them to come check it out. No matter if it's doe estrus or scent, whatever is out there. I just don't think there's going to be a scent to bring him in to close the distance. Anything that I would care about.
Jacob?
So hear me out. I've got a guy that lives within 30 minutes of me. He owns and runs a deer farm, and he does the thing that makes the does come in, and he extracts it from them. And I got a bottle of it late last year, and I doused some scrapes with it, and really didn't notice a ton of difference. But that's pretty much the only thing I use. I might spray myself down with a little scent away. Remind me of the good old days with Papaw. That's that stuff I use. I mean, I don't buy.
You're talking about like the earth scent stuff.
Yeah, I wish I could.
The wafers.
Smell like a hole.
I don't think any of that works, and I'd still wear it. Those wafers, that fresh dirt, that shit smells amazing. I'd use that. I'd put that in my truck, my house. They're phenomenal. We actually have that Rush Creek Monsters that does kind of the same thing, and I've had pretty good experience. But again, I couldn't you always hear of like this anecdotal evidence where somebody experiences something, and it's like, well, yeah, you had this experience, but you're not
for that reason.
You're not in the deer's mind. You have no idea. Like with my buck last year, I literally used a whole bottle of that estrus, and it's fresh. It's as real deal as it can be, and literally a 20-yard circle around the entire scrape. And he came into the scrape, and he was downwind. The thermals were dumping over it, but was he already headed there anyway? I don't know.
Yeah.
Do I think that could have drawn him in? Sure. And I've had that one other time with a mature buck in Indiana, where I did the same thing and had one come in, and this one 1,000% came in to that. He was trying to use the thermals, but it was a light and variable, and I was in that flat, monotonous swampland, and so the deer kept trying to cut where the doe had went, and finally, literally, you could just see it. He just gave up, and he walked right over to the scrape, and he just took it all in. And then I missed him like a douchebag. Now, with that being said, how about calling?
I do call, but I don't really call to deer that I can't already see.
Okay.
I've never really been. I have told people about this, and people kind of look at me funny, but I've accidentally called in blind deer when I ruck a shell with my rifle. I've done that many times, where I get set up and I put my shell in there and I ruck the bolt, and it sounds like antlers. I started having deer coming in looking for me. I'm like, what is he looking for? So then this one deer was about to walk out of my life forever, and I didn't have any rattle bag or anything. I said, I want to try it right now. This is all I got. So I hit that thing a couple times, and here he comes. I mean, it was a buck that I would have loved to have, and I missed him 3 times because he was coming in. So the same hunt, the same day, I go, man, that worked. An hour later, I did it again. Another buck came up. I missed him. Missed him 2 times. I ran out of shells.
Off site rattling. You got
I was in some.
He ejected all the shells out.
Yeah, I was out of bullets after that, and it was a bad deal because I missed. But I started doing that, and when I'm stalking into these circuits and these other funnels, I do that, and I have called in deer doing that. The only time I have a rattle bag with me is when I'm hunting with a bow, and it's because I don't have my rifle to cycle a bow. but yeah, I'll call in deer a lot when I see them going up a ridge and I want to get a better look at them. If it's the right time, they'll come, especially in Kentucky. But I will call and I'll grunt with my mouth every now and then. But most of the time it's the deer that I already see.
Okay.
What time frame are you doing this? Is this like pre-rut, or are they starting to chase?
Yep, they're looking. I'd say pre-rut, like last week October in Kentucky.
Okay.
And maybe the first week of December in Alabama.
Okay. I don't rattle too much. I haven't had a lot of luck. I don't like to blind call. If I can see the deer and see their reaction, I would much rather do that. Sometimes I'll do it out of desperation, right? You got a buck heading the opposite direction, and you're like, "That's a shooter! Like, come on over here." I have had I feel like I've noticed calling work a little bit better if you have like some terrain in the mix, or like some kind of feature that is obscuring the deer's vision, so they have to seek out or have to go around whatever in order to find whatever is making that noise.
It's the only way it'll work with a bow.
Yeah.
Yep.
You just need him to show up with a gun.
Yeah.
I'm kind of the exact opposite. Like, I will call to a deer I see. Obviously, I've got an Indiana deer on my wall because I literally put the illusion in his head that the doe he was looking for that he lost, another buck had found her and he couldn't stand. He ran to the base of my tree.
Perfect.
But I've rattled in a lot of bucks over the last few years. And I think there's a key to it is everybody out there, if you've heard a fight happen between two good deer, you'll understand, like, there's a crack, and then it's a lot of ground noise.
Yep.
You know, sticks breaking and shit. And everybody wants to grab their two big antlers, like Michael Waddell, like there's like an instrument, and you're hunting some, great ranch, and anything's going to run in.
Yeah.
And that's just not what it sounds like.
Mm-mm.
And you're not going to fool all them public deer like that. They may take a peek and whatnot. They won't come investigate. I've even, if I'm not one sticking, if I'm like 2 sticks high or something of that nature, I swear I'll take a chance. I'll climb down and I'll do a rattling sequence, throw the damn things on the ground and run up that tree and get ready. And I actually killed my 2021 public buck in Kentucky. I had done that morning, and 10 minutes later he was at the edge of the water looking for me.
That's awesome.
And I killed him. And of course I rattled in that buck last year. If anybody's watched that hunt, I was, I had rattled and freaking here he comes. He's 60 yards first time I see him. Oh shit, I'm trying to find a place to put my antlers. Didn't think about that. Now I'm like trying to get my brand new camera going. I'm like, oh cool, I'm taking slow-mo videos of them. Now I'm taking pictures of them. And now I went past the video mode. I'm back to slow-mo. I'm like, this is the stupidest shit I've ever done in my life. And finally hit record, got it turned the GoPro on, grabbed my bow, I'm drawing, But I've had a lot of luck rattling in deer. That's how I killed the deer I killed last year. I told Steven that day, is like, I don't want a huge buck. I just want a curious, good 3-year-old. And I was like, we're going to walk this ridge top and we're going to drop over side to side to side to side. And we're going to spark something's curiosity, rattling into these drainages. And that's how I come across the buck I did.
Nice.
Nice.
Man, that's pretty cool. Also, in our episode with Alan Summerford, he talked about, I think every 10th word out of my mouth is natives, but
Surely not.
I'm sick of me. No. But he talks about how what he just said, it obscures their vision. Those 4, 5, 6 foot tall native grass fields, CRP, they can't see. So when you rattle or grunt, they come in to investigate. So it's kind of interesting. If you haven't listened to that yet, highly encourage it. But another thing I wanted to hit on too with scents, I had a dude, he sent me this it's like thing, it warms up a scent pad and it's gonna attract the world record deer and all this shit. And I'm like, I don't understand like how people, where I'm hunting, I'm using terrain and I'm generally at the bottom third of a hill or something like that, using the thermals to drop down, and I expect him to be up there. Well, it is physically impossible for that deer to smell anything down there. He does not smell me, he doesn't smell anything. So my scent is useless.
Yep.
So just to kind of, put that perspective out there as well, like when you get these guys that are hunting hills and that buck's up top and they're using the thermals to hide their own scent, well, you can't just throw deer piss out or something. Like it's not going to work. You can't smell it.
Yeah.
The old deer drag thing?
Yeah.
So years ago as a kid, I was so adamant on doing that. I seen somebody on TV do it. I was like, I've got to do it.
Did it.
Granddad, after we got in the blind, I'm like, I'm going to walk out in the middle of this field and I'm going to drag it all the way back to this blind. We didn't know what we were doing. This buck walks across the field, and instead of getting ready to shoot him because I didn't have a scope at that time because we were piss poor. You know, I'm just shooting him with a SKS open sights. He hits that trail and he doesn't come to us. He goes away to where I started it because the scent is more strong that way, not towards where you're going. You know, it wasn't a mature deer, but
Damn.
it was a buck. You know what I mean? So
That's
they're not
depressing.
they're not going to walk where it's getting more faint. They're going to head towards where it's getting stronger.
Yep.
If they, you know, a 4-year-old deer walks out and it's like, yeah, something's up here.
Smell that in
I
walking
think-
like this rag again.
I can definitely see how it could work. I mean, it's just something I just don't put a whole lot of effort in because if you think about it, I've been ground scent busted a bunch of times to where they come across where I just walked in. Well, if they, you know, if they can smell me that good, they can smell a doe and estrus that good, and it could make them want to go that way. I mean, I definitely see that it could work.
Oh yeah.
My buddy had a pretty good idea, Pierce, using like a Snoopy pole and tossing, you know, since it's so light and packable,
Yep.
toss that bitch out there 50 yards or whatever and just cast, you know, in different
Yeah.
directions and do that. That's a thought.
What is
Try it.
people?
Those little
Like the
tiny,
little kids poles.
Snoopy.
Yep.
Okay, I was.
not a snooty pole,
I was
like what Doc uses when he sips his tea on November 10th.
November 13th when it's done.
I'm all done here, lads. Yours.
Still hunting.
Going back to the scents and what we said earlier, what you said earlier, Emery, and what you said, Chris, with Brush Creek. That's pretty much all I use now, is because that's like as close to the real thing as you can get. We could literally drive up there and he could have extracted that doe estrus, you know, that day. The stuff that,
Those.
yeah, since synthetic stuff and stuff I see sitting in the shelves, I mean, that stuff is not real, or if it's been sitting so long, it's definitely chemically changed. And you know, deer have a great sense of smell. Like they're going to be a mature deer is going to be able to tell the difference, right?
Yep.
Between the real thing and not the real thing. Now you may get lucky and they may be, you know, really love struck and anything that moves, you know, they're going after to get on. But
It ain't about fooling the old ones. It's about fooling the dumb ones.
yeah,
And using it to get them to stop, I think, is a whole different story too. I do that, but you can also how many really good woodsmen literally kick a circle of dirt out, you know, clear basically a scrape to get the deer to come up and J hook. You know, they hit the wind from the thermals of that fresh dirt, and they're like, "Oh, who was up there?" And it gets them to stop or come up there. I mean, there's so many little tricks like that you can do too.
mm-hmm.
There is. And I've got a good buddy that hunts in Alabama and has killed a lot of big deer. And he actually did a podcast with the Southern Outdoorsman about his tactics using fake pee, and that's putting it in scrapes and making mock scrapes. And he swears up and down that's the reason for his success. But it's kind of like we talked about. You know, he's having success, or people have success with it, but is it really because of that? It's hard to know, but it all comes down to what you're confident in and just keep rolling with it.
Yep, confident kills, that's for sure. We've been going on pretty long. One last little thing I want to hit on. Chris, your questions kind of got me thinking about it. It's something we should probably mention.
Something.
Scrapes are real big during pre-rut and during this time frame. I just wanted to hit on when we all kind of target those and when we stop targeting those. So myself, I really only target those during the pre-rut time frame. That's when I think they're the most effective, and even then, it's fairly close to suspected like buck bedding or very close to, you know, some doe bedding. Yeah, but pre-rut in Ohio, I just from my trail camera data, I might target it in those first few days of November, but after that, I really see the activity on those die down quite a bit.
Yep.
Yeah, so I would say, and I'll hunt them, you know, before an early season if necessary, and kind of all through October. But I'll hit them hard and heavy that last week of October, maybe the first, you know, few days of November, and then I don't target those as much. What are you guys typically doing?
Man, if you find one right now, I feel like it's probably at least a 3-year-old plus deer doing it.
I agree.
Then you
Yep.
may have a younger one come in there and fool with it, but he didn't start the damn thing. And they only get, better all the way up till that, 1st to 5th of November time frame. If you're going to target a deer over a scrape, I feel like the last week of October is the time to kill them on it.
Yep.
But like, Chris and Jake Bush and all those guys talk about, all these scrapes on the thermal hubs, and the deer are walking down there in September and hitting them. And, I don't know if I'm just a dumbass and I'm not smart enough to pick up on it back home, which there's a good chance of that. But I don't see the deer at home full with that stuff. They only start opening them up till about the 10th to 15th of October. Like that's when my big deer even show up. Like they're not there. Like they are just not there. It's kind of wild just how different it is across the country, and even though 4 hours apart, how different it can be. But
I will say that the scrape that you're looking for during that time frame looks very, very different. Very,
right.
I would call it dull.
Well,
Almost.
it's not even a scrape; it's a licking branch.
Yeah, you're looking, and oftentimes, like we got a very pronounced visual explanation, right in person from Jake down in Kentucky, and that's probably the best. Those are the best scrapes we'll ever find.
What were those, by the way?
Treat.
Beach trees.
But I mean, you got these big twisted branches and big cleared out ground. It's like, normally I find a small indentation in the ground. It's not pauled out. It's just from where there's foot traffic. That's it. I never see any of those mature bucks clean the scrape out ever. It's always
Really?
that branch. And
Well, what time frame are you talking about?
I mean, really ever. Like when I let that camera soak on the good scrape, I literally never had a buck all that scrape out ever. Not one single mature buck did anything other than come check that branch. And for every, I got to ask this, for every single time that you see a big buck checking it, well, how many were 50, 60, 70 yards downwind? They don't, like, everybody's like waiting on those deer to come to the scrape. And it's like, the scrape's only there because of the traffic. They didn't decide to, well, we need to go make sure we put a scrape here and here. Like, it's only there because there's traffic there. And so when they know it's there, well, they just go downwind and hit it. And like that buck I killed last year, he hit scrapes quite often, but I just don't. I have not seen that as much as he did it. Like he was clearly King Dick as well. So I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. And whenever you hunt scrapes a good bit, and you're actually in the game, and you see how many deer actually scent check that, they're scent checking, you can see what they're doing. You can read the body language, see their nose up in there.
Mhm.
They don't come up to it. If you set up over that scrape to shoot the scrape and not split the distance of that downwind side, you could shoot the scrape and shoot downwind. That's what I would try to do. But in Alabama, they scent check it way more than they actually come to it.
Absolutely. It's like, that's so depressing to think about because I've sat over scrapes for decades and I'm like, ooh, no deal. And it's like, well, duh, stupid. Like, you got to have things in order. And I'm like sitting over a scrape on the edge of a cornfield or something's like,
Yeah.
Some little moron 2-year-old made that the other day and he's never coming back. He's got 40 of them along here. Like, go back in the woods, man.
I just checked an entire album on my phone of a very well-known scrape on my WMA, and not a single one of the mature deer cleaned it out. I was about to tell you were wrong, and I'm wrong.
Well, you don't
Yeah,
have to
most of the time I see them hitting the branch. I have gotten them pulling out the ground. So like my Ohio buck I killed in 21 hit a scrape and he tore that thing up.
Yeah.
And then came over to me and I killed him then. But most of the time they're just hitting the branches.
Yeah.
What date was that?
October 27th.
wasn't after November 12th.
What was I going to say?
I think that's the latest I've ever killed a deer.
Dude, he's literally Josh Beckett. He's Mr. October.
Yeah.
There was a string of 3 years. Like in the third year, I didn't even question it. I was like, well, that poor son of a bitch is dead at the end of October. And then literally Josh goes out. And I think that was the year you hunted with Christian and like maybe had a doe or a nice buck. I think Christian had a nice buck go by him, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes out to his property. And like he's kind of texting like, slow morning or whatever. And then like I got to go to the bathroom at like noon or something. And I'm getting a call from Josh and I'm like, well, he didn't shoot the deer this late. It's like October 27th. Like it's not November 5th and it's warm. And he's like, I just shot Charlie. And I'm like, are you serious? It's like 150-inch deer in the
Wow.
11:30 in the morning.
on a little 20-acre parcel.
Nice.
That is awesome. And another thing I'd like to say on those scrapes, the buck that I talked about earlier that I missed this year, the 150s, the year before, I'd found this scrape early, and it was I pretty much caught it like a couple days after it was made. I'm pretty sure. Hung a camera on it. The camera hung there the whole season. Saw several different bucks using it, but not this big one. Well, I'll be dang, January 10th, about the second rut time period, he comes right up to it like he's hit it the whole season and pawed it out, got on his hind legs, hit his head on the branch. So that tells you he knew the scrape was there the whole time, but that entire season, he never once walked up to it. But the day that I finally got him on camera coming to that scrape, he walked up to it like he's been to it 100 times.
Dude,
He just knew it was there, and when it's time to freshen him up, like in that second rut, that's when he finally came into it and was like, okay, I got to get going.
Yeah, it's freaking nuts, dude.
Yeah,
Wow. Your house is set on 66.
Warm.
I'd have to work overtime to live here.
That's warm. I normally set it at 63 at night.
Jesus Christ.
wow.
Your kids
Yeah, he likes it cold.
I wonder why my son's a little baby when he goes to school and it's like 75 out and he's whining.
Yeah, I think mine's set on 73, and that's pretty comfortable.
I couldn't sleep.
Well, fellas, I feel like that's a good place to stop. We've covered quite a bit in this episode. I want to thank both of you for hopping on. Jake, thank you for taking the time out and hopping on. Emery, thank you for surprising us and hopping on.
Thank you for the great state of Ohio.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's so bad. The first deer I seen was a pretty good deer, and I scared the shit out of him.
That's all right. Just go back tomorrow and kill him.
Yep, that's the plan.
There you go.
Appreciate you guys inviting me, man. I really love talking deer with like-minded people, and I had a good time.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, really appreciate it. For anyone that has, any questions about this podcast or want to hear anything else that we might have missed or might not have covered, just leave a comment. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment there and we'll respond to it. If you're listening on the podcast or on Apple, Spotify, whatever, email us and then we'll get back to you guys. But we really appreciate you listening. And this has been the Whitetail Apprentice Series. I've been your host, Josh Leck, and I was joined by my co-host, Christopher Leopard. Our wonderful guests were Mr. Jake Booth and Mr. Jacob Emery. Everyone, have a good one.
See you.